Over the past few years, metal frames and comps have become more popular now on striker-fired guns, and Smith & Wesson decided to throw their hat in the ring. And in this video, I go over Smith & Wesson's new M&P 2.0 metal carry comp. My family and I like to do these outings that at some point include shields. And I saw this sitting inside the case and I go, you know what? I've never owned an M&P or really shot them that much. So I decided to go for it and get this one right here. Now, this being my first M&P, I was really surprised to see what you got with it because I've bought in several other striker-fired guns, and like Glocks are a good example where they come with about 2 or 3 different backstrap options. And this comes with 4 very usable ones. Additionally, you do get plenty of RDS plates, and of all the optics I had laying around at the time, I found that I had a plate or an option that fit this gun. And you get 2 17-round magazines, and I did a little research, and these are fairly inexpensive at around $30 to $40 a piece, so fairly reasonable. And I paid MSRP, which is about $1,000 plus tax. Now, before we dive further into this gun, I have one brief note for my YouTube manual reviewer. This gun is completely in its factory spec. I may add an optic at some point on this, but there are no modifications done to this gun. So let's get right to it. Now, when I first saw this gun in person, I actually was attracted to it. It is, to me, a good-looking gun. Now, a lot of times I've seen with aftermarket, they can get a little wild with the designs and things like that and lose the functionality. But the more I got to know this gun, the more I said, yep, everything on here has a purpose. The general finish of the gun is definitely something on par with what I would expect for a $1,000 gun, especially in the slide. The frame being aluminum, if you're not familiar with aluminum, we've seen a lot of them, they have this look to them where they look like polymer from a distance. So you really have to get your hands on this just to remember that this thing is aluminum. Now, as far as the ergonomics of it, this has to be one of my favorites, especially from the factory, because you have plenty of options to make it fit your hands. I found for me that I landed at a medium large backstrap here, and you have 4 different sizes here because I found the large, although it wasn't necessarily longer per se, it was just wider. And so I actually just preferred that this be a touch thinner, but this fits my hands so well. And that 1911 grip angle for me feels familiar, so I planted this thing nicely. Now, as you're moving around to it, this whole texture is what it would remind me of about 100 grit sandpaper. I want to carry it a little bit more just to see how it feels against my stomach over time, but it's fairly aggressive, and it's aggressive up here on the front side as well. But I do like that there's a nice undercut here on the frame, so you can really get your hand up in there. And I found that my hand size being about XL in mechanics gloves, you know, this wasn't small at all, so at least putting reloads in this thing, there was no pinching, anything like that. But it filled my hands out great. These serrations on it have to be one of my favorites, and they're incredibly useful, especially if you'd like to rack over the top like I like to. But there is a ton of grip here, and the edges on these things are things I pay attention to, because on aftermarket guns with cuts this stylish and aggressive, they can be a little hard on the hands, but this is incredibly useful all the way around, and they look awesome. I haven't seen a finish like this since the Sandviper, where there is definitely a contrast in how this is a little bit flatter, and this is definitely the more shinier surface, so I like that a lot. And you have it on the rear side here too if you decide you want to rack it from the back for whatever reason. The balance of the gun too, it really leans towards about here in the trigger area with a rear bias, and that really was a highlighting point for me, especially this being a 28-ounce gun. It really shoots more like a heavier gun, largely because of the comp and how the gun fits in my hands. So there was a lot of positives to that. Now, the barrel on this is interesting because when I first looked at it, I felt this was a traditional ported barrel. Now, I've shot plenty of guns with ported barrels as well as traditional comps, and from my perspective, there is in fact a difference in feel. I feel with ports, particularly that ones that are a little bit more round and stacked up here in nature on most guns, they're actually a little bit more harsher and direct in the feel, whereas a more expansion chamber type pushes gas out a little bit more evenly and it has a more subtle touch to it. Now, the thing is though, I feel that this is a win-win because if you look, if I can get close enough to the inside, you'll see that the rifling actually ends right before the port begins. Now, why is that important? I believe under ported barrels that you have so much pressure pushing out because you have nothing around for it to escape and relieve pressure that it's just a harsh push out. Now, when you have a little bit of a breather or expansion around the bullet when it exits, you tend to not have such a harsh amount of pressure pushing upward. So I think this is kind of the balance and win-win for this design. Now I want to talk about the sights. Okay, I like this setup because you've got this black U-out shaped rear sight and you've got these usable night sights up front, contrasted by green if you decide to run them in the daytime. While I mentioned earlier on that I like that this comes with a lot of red dot plates, they're fairly thin and they are made of plastic. When I was pulling them out, it felt like they'd just been ripped off the assembly line because there's just a lot of protrusion on this. So kind of fitting a couple of the plates on here felt awkward at first. They do work, they're effective. One thing I do appreciate is that they are low so they don't push the optics so high up like on some guns I've seen. Now, as far as it co-witnessing from the factory, that is going to be the drawback of this particular setup. If you're wanting to have that, you would have to consider different sights up front and the rear if you would want a true co-witness, as they do block them out. Lefties can rejoice because this definitely is a true ambi setup with slide releases on both sides and a good amount of leverage on that to push down. Now the mag release too is reversible, so you can in fact flip it to the other side. And I do kind of like this because it's nice and grippy, so if your hands are sweaty, that is one thing that is nice, is to push there and know that you point of contact that you know is going to feel recognizable. And so one thing I will point out is just kind of this inherent mag well that's built into the frame. As you can see here, there's definitely beveling all the way around here. You know, it's a very natural feeling, and once that mag is in there, it's not like my hand protrudes on the bottom where I'll pinch it. So as far as reloads on this thing, I can tell that this gun is already going to be pretty easy to reload on. Last time I played with an M&P was a friend's, just one he had hooked up with an Apex trigger, and it reminded me of a Glock trigger where it has that rolling break and it's kind of just a mix of mush. So this is M&P's performance trigger, and so just kind of walking you through the characteristic of it. Okay, so there's definitely that detent you get into, and it's pretty far out there, but obviously it does its job. There's a good amount of pre-travel that you got to get through, as you'll see there. And so you get through here about a first wall, and it's sitting at about 90 degrees, as you see there, and about 4.5 pounds of pressure and a brake. Now, the reset on this is something that caught my attention because for whatever reason, if you hold the trigger down and pull it all the way back, it goes to slide lock. But popping that down here so you can see that reset, when you start to roll it out, and I'm going to roll it out really slowly here. Okay, just very slowly so you can see that distance. Okay, just reset. It's not very audible and it feels fairly anemic. So the good news is I'm right back on the wall and I can break through it again. A little bit of creep and a break. Okay, and if you haven't seen my hammered versus striker fire guns, the one thing I will point out is you start to get lower on pull weights, the reset can feel anemic, and this gun kind of sticks out to me on that. Now, in comparison to other striker fire guns out there, resets on them are a little bit more aggressive. Like I think of the Canik or even Glock's reset are a little bit more aggressive than this one with identical pull weights. So get it out, and there it is, it's a reset. Not audible, not very tactile, but it does the job. So I originally had a different take for the holster bit for this because they were sort of kind of hard to find, especially if you were sticking to the logic of trying to type in metal carry comp. I did kind of think that there might be a difference in size, but once I took a look at the dimensions, I took a gamble and picked up a T-Rex holster for the 4¼ full size M&P, so it does do the job. And one thing I will say is this first T-Rex holster I ever owned, and it's actually really nice and the fit is solid. So I will be carrying this in upcoming 1,000 round review count. So I will flip it back to the rest of the video. All right, so that's our overview, and it's time to get my favorite part, which is the shooting experience of this gun. Now, before I do that, I asked if you like this video, please hit that like button, as that helps me a lot. And you're gonna wanna subscribe, because I am gonna do a 1,000 round follow-up on this gun, and I'll explain a little bit more on that as we go along. Now, this being a first shots video, I actually wanted to get kind of my first reaction to shooting this gun, and so this is what I ended up doing.
All right, here we go. So this is the first shots for the M&P Carry Metal Comp. I don't know if I said that right, but that is a mouthful. All right, just warm up here on a steel that's about 10 yards away, and up. Ooh, that's nice. That's very soft. Wow, accurate. Okay, that was a lot softer recoil impulse than I expected. It's pretty nice. Shooting the Buffalo Creek ammunition here, the 115, so it's a good combo for this. Let's do some doubles here, so I can get this down here. Oh, missed that one on high right, but here we go. Yeah, it is not what I expected. It shoots a lot softer, and the return to zero is happening a lot quicker than I thought I would. I mean, so far so good. Let's actually put some rounds through it for the test.
And as you can see, I essentially treated that as my warm-up for the drills that you normally see done on my channel. Now, the first drill I do is a 15-yard precision accuracy drill, just to see how this thing groups under slow fire. And I was a little taken back by the initial hits I had saw in this. I did start this off with the Buffalo Creek ammunition, which I did find was very, very soft shooting ammo. When I went to go do the doubles, which is where I set a target at 10 yards, and I just do 2 pulls at a time, just to see what the splits are like and how tight the group I can get with this. Now, this having a little comp on it and the ergos being very ideal for me, I was able to get this right at about 24 splits while maintaining about a 4-inch group, and it felt great to shoot. And I was really looking forward to the 25-yard build drill, because the return to zero was quick, yet it still had a fairly soft recoil impulse, considering how light this gun is at 28 ounces. And to kind of give you a comparison of where this landed with other guns I've had on this channel, it was on par with both the PX4 Storm, the Langdon Tactical model, as well as the all-new SIG P365 AXG Legion, which is a Compton metal frame striker-fired gun as well. So the performance was there. Now I transitioned into my 25-yard build drill, in which I just grab the gun from the barrel and just throw 6 rounds at an IDPA target. Now, when I usually go do this, I will usually shoot the first one just to see about where it's grouping. And I was really surprised, because as you'll see, it was not good. So I kind of just brushed it off and said maybe that was just me getting used to the gun. So second round goes, and I still had fairly abysmal results, and I went way slower. So at this point I go, this just doesn't seem right. And when I looked at the original target that was at 15 yards on the precision accuracy, I said that just doesn't seem right as well. So at a moment's notice, I ended up grabbing my chronograph, because I wanted to see what the velocity was of this Buffalo Creek ammo, and it actually ended up being a lot slower than I thought. And what it ended up averaging at was about 1,089 feet per second. To give you an idea, the Blazer 115 aluminum, which you normally see on this channel, is rated at 1,150 feet per second through a 5-inch barrel. So a fairly big difference. And I actually happen to have some Blazer 115 aluminum, and I chronoed that as well. And on average, there was nearly a 50 feet difference per second. So I decided to do the remainder of the test with the Blazer 115 aluminum. And I decided to see if I could redeem myself with this gun, just starting on 15 yards, and the groups showed up the way I expected. So it is something to pay attention to, that this gun particularly likes faster, quicker ammo, which makes sense being a comped gun. And then I started from basically ground zero and did 5 strings on this drill. And so where this landed time-wise was an average of 419, which is really quick, especially for a gun this light, with an average hit factor of just right over 5 at 5.078. Now, to give you reference for that, the Shadow 2 Compact came at an average time of 4.79, and the 365 AXG Legion came in at 5.59 when I ran them with iron sights. Now, the accuracy was better for me on those two guns. I had quick times with this because this gun was easy to get to work with. The ergonomics felt great in my hands, and the sights were informing me that I could shoot quicker than I think. Now, I think with time, I could start to tighten those groups up, and when I do my follow-up review, I'm going to attach a red dot to this because typically I end up doing way better with that. Now, this is where this gun exceeded my expectations, and this was another case of, as I got more used to it, I started going faster, and I actually started to increase my accuracy as well. And that had everything to do that this gun in transition just felt right, because when you have good ergonomics and you don't have a ton of weight, a decent balance, you can accomplish a lot of good things. And this is where this drill really shows up for that. Now, leaning back on the data again with the Shadow 2 Compact, that came in at an average of 5.37 and an 8.400 hit factor, followed by the 365 AXG Legion, which was a little slower at 5.81 and a hit factor of 8.288. Now this gun, and you're gonna want to hang on to this, now this gun just came in at just an average over 5 seconds at 5.06. So mind you, there was one run, which was my last one, that was a sub 5 second run. And the hit factor was 8.974. Now, the only guns I have that hit over 9 on this drill were the Shadow 2 Compact with the red dot, and the rest of them are the 2011. So really hopped up guns, and this gun is scraping that with the iron sight setup. So I believe I can increase my accuracy and speed on the 20 yard and possibly the 15 yard target to increase that in the future, but as is, it's definitely good to go. Now tell me what you guys think of this. I'm thinking I may see if I can get my hands on the new Taran Tactical Canik and do a head-to-head. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments below. But in my 1,000 round review, there are a couple things I do want to follow up with this, and I want to break it in to see if I can improve the accuracy as well as my skill with it. I want to carry it. I'm going to carry it for at least 30 days. I did order a holster for it, as I mentioned earlier, so we'll see if that works out. I do want to see what it's going to do with the red dot, because I think it's going to do fantastic, because a lot of what I'm seeing already in the sights is telling me that this is going to be a good red dot gun. And finally, I want to try different ammo with this just to see how it responds to 124 and 147 grain. So you're going to want to see what that ends up being. But as far as where this gun is today, I will say that this gun is off to a great start. For it being $1,000, well, I will say you guys, I'll leave that value proposition up to you, but I will say at least the performance right there meets my expectations. The ergonomics of it, the balance, and the general styling of it are things I like about it. What do you guys think? You guys think that this thing is worth $1,000? Sound off in the comments below. And until next time, guys, we will see you at the range.